Hey guys, how's it going? It's Travis Mortz again with the ForesthillFilmLab. It's been a little bit of time since I put out a video, so I decided to come back strong and talk about my Nikon SP rangefinder. This is one of my favorite cameras in my entire collection, and it's also one of the best performing cameras I own. So I'd like to share with you guys a little bit about why this camera is so great and also what kind of impact it had on Nikon history as a whole. So stay tuned and we're going to get talking about it. So here we have the Nikon SP rangefinder. This camera was released in 1957, which is only just 3 years after the Leica M series, the M3 came out. So when the Leica M3 came out, it was Leica's first camera ever to have a viewfinder and rangefinder integrated into one. And that's really when the popularity of Leica started exploding, because the rangefinder cameras were great. The Leica thread mount rangefinders were great, but shooting them was very difficult. The viewfinder window was tiny, the rangefinder circle was tiny, and nowadays that we have all these other cameras in comparison, shooting a thread mount Leica camera is a nightmare. So once Leica introduced the M series camera, Nikon had to answer with something, and what they answered with was the Nikon SP. Nikon was already making rangefinders at this time, much like the one you see on the cover here. This is a Nikon S2. But they were very simple and they didn't have anything very special about them. So what Nikon decided to do is they decided to come out with the SP, which is considered the professional model. That's what the P stands for. And Nikon's design was actually derived from Contax, which is a camera that's 30 years older than this. I've got one here actually. So as you can see, this is the Contax 2. This is the first camera in the entire world to have a viewfinder and rangefinder integrated into one. And this camera actually came out in 1933. So it was 25 years ahead, 25 years ahead of Leica as far as technology goes. So, nowadays we think of Leica as a very revered brand, but realistically, Nikon and Zeiss, this is a Zeiss Icon camera, they were also at the forefront of rangefinder technology, and they were really all battling it out for customers. They were all battling it out for the best camera of the time, and because of that, we really benefit from that, because these cameras just kept getting better and better, until 35mm SLRs came out, in which the rangefinder nearly died off. So as you can see, the Contax 2 is a very simple version of the Nikon, but they take the same exact lens mount. So these two lenses are actually interchangeable, which is pretty badass. So if I find a Contax Zeiss lens, I can buy it and put it on my Nikon rangefinder, and I mean, there's really no complaints there. That's pretty awesome. So just wanted to show you guys the Contax 2, just so you can kind of see the similarities that it has to the Nikon. We got a collapsible lens here, and you see it's got the same dial focusing that the Nikon has, and the same overall design that the Nikon has. Nikon copied this from Contax because it was such a good design. So I'm going to move this out of here, but I just wanted to show you guys that, so you can see some of the similarities. So when Nikon decided to release this camera, they wanted to really go above and beyond what they had already done. So where their rangefinders were really nice before, they were very simple, and so was the Leica. The Leica, only possessed 3 frame lines natively in the camera, and then anything wider than 50 had to have range or viewfinder goggles and all that crap. So Nikon decided, we're not doing any of that shit. We're gonna go through and we're gonna put six different frame lines inside of this camera. So I could put 6 different lenses on this camera and have frame lines for every single one of them, which is fascinating only because there's not a single camera that I know of that's ever done this. So here we have 4 separate frame lines that are adjustable just by this dial, and then we also have a separate viewfinder window that I'll show you guys later that accommodates 35mm and 28mm frame lines. So just that alone was groundbreaking, and Nikon decided that they weren't going to stop there. They were going to keep doing other things that were groundbreaking, like this counter here. This was the first Nikon to have a self-resetting counter. as you can see on the contacts, you actually have to set it yourself. You see, you would put your film in there and you'd set it to 0, and if you forgot to do that, then there's no way to keep track of your frames, and that's, you know, kind of a pain. So when Nikon did that, it was really convenient for the photographer. Some other things that this camera can do is this was the first Nikon rangefinder that was available for a motor drive. As you can see, this spool here is got a little bit of a notch in it. This was the first rangefinder that you could put a motor drive on, which really changed the game for rangefinder shooters, because having a motor drive completely changes your style of shooting, as well as you know, what you can and cannot shoot. It makes you quicker, obviously. And this camera also came with a bulb mode and a T mode for doing exposure, like long exposures, which is really nice that, you know, you're able to open the camera up completely and leave it open. So you basically didn't even need a cable release with this camera, as you know, for long exposures. This was the first Nikon rangefinder to come integrated with a self-timer. And I mean, these are all just small features for us now, but back then this was a huge deal. Now you could have a Nikon rangefinder and shoot, you know, a self-portrait of you and your family, or what have you. Another important thing that this camera actually gave to the world was the design of the world's best 35mm SLR camera, which is the Nikon F. The Nikon F actually adopted almost all of the things from the Nikon SP. Many say that the Nikon SP is completely responsible for the Nikon F's success because of the build quality of it is so good. You can see here, if I turn these towards you, and we're going to get a closer look at these later, so I'll show you, but they've got the same shutter dial, they've got the same counter, they've got the same body style, and actually they have identical shutters as well, so you can replace a Nikon F shutter and an SP shutter. They're the same shutter. To me, that's really, really exciting, only because the Nikon F is such a reliable camera that, you know, that I've never seen one that doesn't work. So to know that this camera has the same exact internals as my Nikon F, it really makes me, you know, rest assured that this camera is as reliable as it seems like it is. It's been going this whole entire time, and I really don't expect it to slow down anytime soon. I'd like to get a closer look at these cameras so I can show you guys some of the really fine details and, you know, all the great things that Nikon did with this. So we're going to get a closer look at this camera, and we'll also take a look at some of the similarities that it has with the Nikon F, because for me personally, that's one of the most important things about this camera, is that it was the predecessor to the Nikon F. This camera came out just 2 years later, so Nikon only advertised this camera for 2 years. They made them in very low numbers. This is the end-all be-all for Nikon rangefinder cameras, even to this day. You know, they've made rangefinders even in 2000, which is a copy of a Nikon S3, and it still isn't the Nikon SP. The SP is definitely the most revered, and for good reason. So I'd like to get a closer look at this camera and show you guys some of the other things about it, where you can see it more in detail. So here we have the Nikon in all of its glory. Look how beautiful that thing is. I just want to show you guys a little bit of the features of it up close so you can see it more in detail, you know, exactly what this thing's got going on. So here we'll start with, this is our viewfinder dial. As you can see, it's measured in centimeters. So we've got 13.5, 10.5, 8.5, and 5, which is 50 millimeters, 85, 105, and 135. And then additionally, we've got two finding windows on the back. So this one here is where we'll see the frame lines that we've decided up here. And then in this smaller window, it's actually got two fixed frame lines that will show us 28 and 35 millimeter, which would then make it so this camera could accommodate up to 6 lenses. As you can see here, we've got our shutter dial, which has bulb as well as T, which will just open the camera completely, which is pretty awesome. This camera's got a cloth shutter, The Nikon SP actually came out with two different shutters. After this, it became titanium. This is one of the earlier models, so it still came with cloth. And the titanium, I think, is a little more sought after, but it doesn't make the camera any more or less, functional. So there's our opening. There's T. This camera goes all the way up to a thousandth of a second as well, which is really impressive. Super snappy. And what I wanted to show you guys actually was, let me put this back on there, but I wanted to show you some of the similarities that this camera has with the Nikon F. If I can slide this on there, Jesus. So here we've got the SP, and as you can see, here we have the Nikon F. Now, if you look at the tops of these two cameras, you'll see that they're almost identical as far as some of the things that they've got going on. So we've got the rewind dial, which is the same dial. We've got our shutter speed dial, which is the same. Our winding lever, which is the same. Our counter, which is the same. Our back removal system, which is the same. Let's see. Our shutter, which is the same. And by having the same exact shutter in the Nikon F as the SP, that tells me that my Nikon SP is as durable as the Nikon F. So the Nikon F came out 2 years after the SP did, and a lot of people say that the Nikon F's popularity was because of how good the SP was built. If the SP has all of the same features as the Nikon F, and it came out just 2 years earlier, I would have to agree that it is very responsible for the success of the Nikon F, which, as we know, is one of the best 35mm cameras in history, with over 1 million made. Here we go. Let's see. Let's get a closer look at the top of this camera, because it's gorgeous. So here we have our focusing dial. And this little tab here is what releases it if it's locked at infinity, which it is. So we press that tab and we just turn it, and as you can see, the dial's moving. And look at that. There's our focus distance. You can see here we have our hyperfocal range, so you can see at which aperture your focus will reach. And another odd thing about this camera, if you notice, this lip here, we've got a couple of them. Well, what that is actually another lens mount. So as you can see, this lens goes into the camera, like so. And that is because it's a 50mm lens, and this inside helicoil only accommodates 50mm. And then if we want to put any other lens on here, we have to grab it, and it actually mounts on the outside ring. Let's see if I can get it on there. There we go. So now we've got our 35mm lens on there. You can see the aperture rings are just so smooth. And it's actually mounted on the outside ring, and once it catches, it will also, here, watch. There we go. So you grab it, you get it to catch, and now we can focus our lens with that dial just the same as our 50, and it's going to mount on the outside. And this is the same as contacts, so any old contacts lens I find that mounts on the outside, I could just stick onto this one, which I think is really awesome. And this camera, you don't have to do it with that. You can do it with this dial too. You can turn it by hand, but it's just kind of nice for fine-tuned focusing to slowly turn it. And for you guys watching, this R right here is actually an indicator for if you're using infrared film, because visible light and infrared light have two different wavelengths, so infrared film actually falls on a separate scale for focusing, which is pretty interesting. So here we've got our film plane indicator, we've got our Nippon Kogaku logo, and this camera was one of the first rangefinder cameras that could have a motor drive for it. Let's see here. See how this is notched a specific way, so you could put a motor drive on this camera, which would be pretty awesome to find one of those. This little indicator turns so we know if our film's in there when we're rewinding and whatnot. So here's our PC mount, which is in the same exact location as it is on the Nikon F. So many things about this camera are identical to the Nikon F, which is why it's just such a workhorse. We got our self-timing lever here, which is nice and tight. So yeah, that is the Nikon SP up close. I just wanted to give you guys a better look at it so you could really appreciate this camera in all of its glory, for what it is. So there's that. We're gonna go back now and take a look at some samples from this camera so you guys can see what this thing really can do. Now that you guys have seen a closer look at the camera and you get a better idea of how easy this camera really is to use, and also some of the benefits that it has over other rangefinders, I'd like to show you guys some photos so you can see just exactly what the results are from this camera. Because personally, I've owned many Leicas in the past, and ever since I got this Nikon rangefinder, I've almost completely stopped even shopping for them. The prices of them are astronomical, and quite honestly, the quality that comes out of a Leica is excellent, but I don't think it's better than the Nikon rangefinder. I don't think it's worse either, of course, but these cameras were being built at the same exact time, and they were being built in competition with each other, and it's fair to say that they are nearly equal in quality, and it's more a preference thing, just as it is today. It's hard to say if Nikon or Canons are better today, but everybody's got their preference and they're going to stick with that. So for me personally, I've fallen in love with the Nikon rangefinder system, and I'm sure I'll have another Leica in the future, but I don't think that it's going to get quite the same respect from me, only because Leica cameras are very similar across the board. There's not a whole lot of innovation between them. And I think what Nikon did with the rangefinder, the SP here, is really excellent. A lot of camera companies did not ever create, the ultimate camera that's even better than the rest of their line. They usually try to keep it pretty close in tow. So for a camera company to make the SP, which was basically a Nikon rangefinder on steroids, I think it's really badass. So take a look at some of these shots. I'll include some street stuff in there as well as just some normal Canon stuff. And you can see exactly what this camera is capable of, because it really is pretty impressive how old this camera is and how great the images still are from it. So take a look at these photos, and I'll see you in a second. So I hope you guys enjoyed some of those examples. As you can see, the way that the Nikon SP handles sharpness is second to none. You can tell from those images that it doesn't really get much better than that as far as 35mm film goes. For me personally, I think that my Nikon SP delivers some of the best results that I could even ask for. The only reason I don't shoot it all the time is because it's not perfect for everything. Rangefinder cameras definitely have their place in photography, and I think that if you haven't shot a rangefinder camera, I would encourage you to do so. Shooting with a rangefinder is an excellent way to detach from the image a little bit and just kind of go out and shoot. You don't get to see what's in focus. You don't get to decide all those things, but basically you're just deciding focus distance and exposure, and then when you get your images back, it's just even more satisfying, because I never get to look through this lens, so I don't I don't ever know what it's going to look like beforehand, so I have to shoot the camera in order to see the results. I love that. I love that about rangefinders. You know, I could look through my Nikon F and I could focus on someone and I could say, "Oh my goodness, this lens is so sharp and the background is so buttery." But with a rangefinder, you cannot do that. You don't get to look through the lens, and quite honestly, you don't have a damn clue what the image is going to look like unless you take it and develop it yourself. So if nothing else, I think rangefinders are great because it encourages you to shoot the camera. You know, a lot of people just collect cameras and they don't use them, and with a rangefinder, the only way you'll get to see how good it can be is by using it. So I hope you guys learned a little bit more about the Nikon rangefinder system, and I hope it encourages you to you know, maybe search for something other than a Leica. Of course, Leicas are great, but they are so expensive, and it's deterring. You know, it's a little bit deterring when you want to shoot a rangefinder and you think, well, I'll shoot a Leica, and then you look at the price of one lens and you realize you aren't going to be shooting a Leica anytime soon. So, you know, maybe go out there, look for a Nikon or even a Contax rangefinder. Are very affordable. There's also the Zorky, the Russian rangefinders that are also derived from the Contax. Canon also makes a rangefinder, which Canon actually stayed more on the side of the Leica thread mount cameras. Once you know, once Leica started making the M series camera, Canon's cameras changed quite a bit, and I wouldn't say that they fell out of the race, but they certainly aren't as revered as the Nikons and the Contaxes and the Leicas. You know, Canon kind of directed their attention elsewhere after the great rangefinder wars of the 50s. So anyways, I'm rambling, but thank you guys for watching so much. We're almost to 1,000 subscribers, which is so awesome. It's really cool to have your guys' support. It makes me want to keep doing these videos. So I appreciate that so much. And if you guys have any ideas for videos in the future, please feel free to comment below. You know, I can only think of so much on my own. I love talking about this stuff, but I've got so much crap to talk about that I can't really decide what I'm going to do next. So I would love the help. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and keep on shooting.